The Blackstorm Bounty Hunter will be one of the brand new archetypes introduced in Jetpack 7's newest book, Blackstorm Realms. Join me this week to see my writing process in creating a playable class archetype for 5th edition. Hello players and GMs, and welcome to another video by Jetpack 7. Before we get started, I just want to let you all know that the beta releases for our next book, Blackstorm Realms, have just begun. They will be updated and released every other week, the newest one coming out this upcoming weekend. So if you want to get on board for that and help us craft this amazing new campaign setting, follow the link in the description and join in on the conversation. This week, I wanted to take you all with me in my process for creating a brand new archetype for 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. I've gotten a couple comments here or there about doing a series of videos on homebrewing new D&D stuff, so I figured a great place to start would be an archetype that I'm creating for our newest book. There's not too many videos on YouTube about creating D&D content, and I think that's because it is difficult to put into words the writing process. So the way I see it, the best way I can describe it is just to show you, hence the unusual format for this video. It can also be a rather long explanation, so I'm going to do this as simply and as quickly as I can, so let's jump right into it. First things first, the name. Blackstorm Bounty Hunter is what I was given. They thought it would work as a ranger archetype. I agreed. We also floated the idea of a new class, but creating a whole new class is a lot more work and a lot more pages in a book, so we wanted to see if we could capture the idea without overcomplicating things first. Otherwise, that was all the information I had, so it was time to start an idea board. My mind works pretty cinematically. To be inspired to write, I need the imagery of a scene in my head so that I can then translate those images into words. So first of all, I need pictures. Bounty Hunter. Bounty Hunter. Bounty Hunter? That'll work for now. I like these bounty hunters. This is helpful, but still very vague. I've got a person, now I need a place. I need to keep in mind that I am creating this for a specific campaign setting, so I need to make sure it fits into that realm, which means it's time to steal ideas. Well, not exactly. I look to the other things that have been written about this setting. We have a team of very talented writers whose names you can see on the Kickstarter page and whose ideas will give me some incredible context for this archetype. I need an environment for my bounty hunter so that the scene can fully come together in my mind. How does magic in this realm manifest? How does this character interact with the world around them? For inspiration, I look to one of the archetypes we've already made public, the Blackstorm Sorcerer. This is a perfect reference because it addresses multiple questions that I had. How does magic manifest in the Blackstorm, and how is it used by the people who can control it? The first thing I notice is the very first line. The ribbons and spheres of magical energy that exist in the Blackstorm are unseen by most, but not you. This is insanely helpful because it quickly addresses those questions I had. Magic manifests in ribbons and spheres of magical energy, and someone who can see them also may have the ability to manipulate them. The next thing I see are some spells that the sorcerer gets. Also awesome, because now I can see what schools of magic and types of spells the spellcasters get from this place. Now we get to the initial features. I really like this ability, Sphere Empowerment, and I kind of want to do something similar for the Bounty Hunter because it is a combat-focused ability, and what's a Bounty Hunter if they can't excel in combat? Now that the precedent has been set that accessing the spheres can empower your AC, it would be perfectly reasonable for another magic user native to the Blackstorm to be able to do something similar. I want to avoid too many abilities that lean into the arcana side of magic, because the image I have in my head is a grittier, more rough and tumble sort of character who can manipulate the magics of the Blackstorm, but use that magic more to enhance their hunting abilities than cast crazy spells and stuff. You know, like a ranger. So I'm going to sort of ignore this other feature just for this archetype. But hold on, there's a second part. Beginning at 2nd level, whenever you spend at least 1 sorcery point, you must roll on the Blackstorm field effects chart below, which, if you all don't know, is a wild magic-esque table with effects like creating a tear in reality, manipulating time, or polymorphing yourself into a Pugon, which is this adorable little dragon dog. So this obviously made me think. We'll get back to it. Now, this feature gave me some ideas and some very, very distinct imagery. The idea with this is basically that the ribbons of magic in the Blackstorm each have different effects. You can see here that the given examples are the ribbon of surety, lassitude, and echoes. This immediately struck an image in my mind of a ranger pulling back their bow as a ribbon wraps itself around the arrow and is launched at an enemy, applying the associated effect. In the case of the sorcerer, you can choose which one of the ribbons to attach, but since I want this ranger to have less control over the specifics of the magic, I kind of like the idea of it being a random ribbon. So now we're getting into rollable table territory here, and I love a rollable table for magic effects. So I took a note. 6 to 10 ribbons and effects applied to attacks. We'll get back to that later. Blackstorm Manipulator didn't give me much from the perspective of a ranger, since it has to do with pretty specific magic sorcerer stuff, like I said before, but I really liked the idea of this Blackstorm Traveler ability. Features like this exist elsewhere in 5e, so it's pretty common to be able to teleport long distances every now and then for certain classes. This is nothing game-breaking, but definitely fits the idea of being able to chase down a target as a bounty hunter would need to be able to do. So I took a note for that one too. Teleport ability. When I was looking through this sorcerer list, I found a bit of a trend, and there was one word that kept popping up in my mind: chaos. I want to make the Blackstorm Bounty Hunter a Chaos Ranger. And here's why. The Blackstorm not only allows for chaos, but there are multiple instances of it just in this archetype. The idea I had for a random table of ribbon effects combined with the Blackstorm field effects table creates so much opportunity for randomized effects that it's a difficult thought to ignore. So now, I've got ideas to actually get the ball rolling. We have a Chaos Ranger with a few thoughts for features already in place. Something to utilize spheres to increase AC or general durability, random ribbon effects on attacks, a teleport ability, and something that could trigger an effect from the Blackstorm field table. This is the point when I go to the most important phase when crafting any 5e archetype, looking up the other archetypes and seeing what Wizards of the Coast has already done. The reason this is so important is twofold. First of all, you don't want to create something too similar to an already existing archetype. A feature may be similar to the feature of another archetype, that's fine, but we have a tendency to pull from our subconscious more than we think. You may end up crafting something more similar to pre-existing archetypes without even realizing it. Second, archetypes in 5e create this amazing framework for the design process that allows for a very simple plug-and-play style. What I mean is that every archetype from the same class follows the exact same pattern with only very slight variations between them. They get features at the same levels, and usually those features serve a similar purpose depending on the goal of the archetype. Basically, when an archetype gets a more passive feature at say 7th level, the other archetypes will usually also get a more passive feature at that same level, even though they are different archetypes. This framework allows you to craft an archetype with relative ease because it takes a lot of the pressure off of you to come up with something entirely new and unique. Rather, you can use the skeleton Wizards of the Coast created and simply fill in the rest. So looking at the Ranger, they get archetype features at levels 3, 7, 11, and 15. Looking at the archetypes a bit more closely, we can also see that the 3rd level feature is usually the cornerstone feature of this archetype, which makes sense since it's the first one you get. The 7th level one tends to be more utility or defense based, the 11th level one tends to be offensive, and the 15th level one tends towards defense and utility once again. This is broad, of course, as the Ranger class doesn't quite have the same level of consistency across its archetypes as the Cleric or Paladin, for example, but generally speaking, you want to try not to stray from that as much as possible. This makes your archetype a bit easier to balance, as you're staying loyal to the established meta of archetypal design in 5e. The further you stray from that, the more complicated it will become. So, keeping all that stuff in the back of our minds, let's put these features into words. Normally, I'd have some very rough language, just specific enough to capture what kind of action economy, damage, etc. each feature would take or deal, but since this is a video, I'm just going to show you my initial rough draft. First of all, I wanted the Bounty Hunter to have Detect Magic, no matter what. With the emphasis on magic in the Blackstorm, it just felt right. So I gave it to them. Many archetypes, especially the most recent ones, have 2 features at one level, usually a very minor passive one paired with a more powerful active one. So to go with that, I started out with the AC increase feature, where there's also a chance to trigger an effect from the Blackstorm field table. Then I went into the ribbon effects feature with 6 different possible effects. You can see here that I took the already established ribbons, made their effects similar to the ones from the sorcerer, but unique enough to fit into a ranger archetype, and then added a few more to round out the table to a D6 roll. Some are definitely more potent than others, like sleep and the stun, but the fact that it's randomized does help balance that out. After that, I added in the teleport feature. I wanted to also give the ranger the opportunity to make an attack with the teleport because I think rangers kind of need all the help they can get. I want to try and make it to where the ranger feels like they can make an attack or cast a spell every turn, and the imagery of a bounty hunter popping through the Blackstorm and firing off a shot is too cool to pass up. I ended things with a sort of mark feature that I definitely wanted to include in a bounty hunter archetype. I didn't want it to just add raw damage like has been done in a few other archetypes. Rather, I wanted it to circle back to the ribbon enhancements and increase the amount of chaos they can cause by increasing its frequency. So, that was my first draft. Before we move on, let's talk about language. A huge part of the challenge with writing content for D&D is capturing the correct language. My philosophy with writing anything for 5e is to capture the exact intent of the feature with as few words as possible. As an example, let's look at the simplest archetype in the game, the Champion Fighter. Its first feature, Improved Critical, reads as follows. Beginning when you choose this archetype at 3rd level, your weapon attacks score a critical hit on a roll of 19 or 20. This is great wording. It is extremely clear, yet extremely concise. A very bad example would be if it instead said something like, when you roll an attack roll to hit a creature, if you roll a 19 or 20 on the d20 roll, your attack critically strikes. The first one removes the fluff, the excessive use of the word roll, and gets across the same point without leaving any room for doubt. That's obviously only one example, and there are certain situations in which finding the right wording is extremely difficult. The thing is, Wizards of the Coast has created a lot of stuff for you to look through, so odds are the mechanic you've created isn't brand new, and there's probably an example of how they worded it somewhere. It's just a matter of finding it. Wording is very important in D&D. It's the difference between a 20-foot diameter sphere and a 20-foot radius sphere, or a point within range and a point you can see within range. It can change the whole functionality of a feature, so don't brush over how your stuff is worded. Next step, editing. In my case, that means sending the rough draft to my boss, the head writer. He's actually a really nice guy, so it's not that scary. I send it to him, and he sends me back some notes, which basically consist of a couple ideas to better capture the idea he had for the archetype, and a couple things he felt were missing. The biggest thing he mentioned was the idea of tracking, which made perfect sense to me since it is a bounty hunter. And as time had gone on after creating my first draft, I had fallen out of love with the AC sphere idea as it was too similar to the sorcerer feature and didn't feel particularly potent or interesting, so I decided to replace it with tracking features instead, which brings me to my second draft, the one I am currently on, which you can see here. First thing you may notice is that I swapped ribbon enhancement to be the first feature. To me, that felt like the cornerstone of the archetype more than the AC increase. Plus, if I wanted to get rid of the AC increase, it makes even more sense for it to go here. The only thing this choice brought into question was the balance of this feature. It's now a 3rd level feature, so I have to make sure that moving it from 7th to 3rd level didn't make any of it feel way more powerful than before. The only thing I decided that needs to change is the Ribbon of Fury. 2d8 on top of the d8 at base from the ribbons themselves is a little much at 3rd level. So I added scaling. A d8 at first, growing to 2d8 at 10th level. Scaling abilities like this is an easy solution to keep damage not only balanced at first, but relevant later. You see it with every damage cantrip. They grow as you level up, otherwise they'd be either way too strong at first or totally irrelevant later. Otherwise, everything is determined by proficiency, spell save DC, etc., which all scales naturally as the game progresses, so it feels pretty balanced to me here. The tracker feature, I'm still not 100% sure of, honestly. I wanted to capture the ability to magically track both creatures and objects, since there is a large portion of this book dedicated to magic items and a brand new crafting system. Again, if you want to know more about that, sign up for the beta. Lots of discussion is happening in our beta Discord channel about those items and their balance, and we want as much input as we can get. I really enjoy the idea of a tracking feature that has a chance to alert the target that they are being tracked, a sort of ping in their minds that alerts them to interference. The part of this feature I'm not sure about is right here, increasing the distance based on the level of spell slot expended. I like the idea, but I feel like it may be adding a bit too many unnecessary complications to this feature. Let me know what you all think in the comments. Is this feature too complicated, or should 5e have more things like this? Since I removed the AC feature that had a chance to trigger the Blackstorm Fields effects, I knew I wanted to move that idea somewhere else. I definitely wanted it to be an effect that would be triggered in combat, but instead of overloading the ribbon enhancement feature with another chaotic possibility, I thought it would make sense in Blackstorm Transference instead. Pretty much anytime you manipulate the magics of the Blackstorm, there's a chance something wild happens. That's what I wanted to capture. And then I kept Blackstorm Sentinel the same because I don't see an issue with it as of yet. That's one thing I try to maintain when I'm going through the process of creating an archetype. Don't make changes if you don't feel the need. The need may strike you later, but until then, just leave things as they are. It gets too muddied if you start changing things around too much as you're writing. The next step will be to send this out once more and continue getting notes on it. There's a bit of language left I definitely need to clean up, but otherwise we are one step closer to being able to release it as a finished product. If you want to see this archetype in its final form before the release of the book, the link to join the beta is in the description below. Blackstorm Realms is set to release later this year, so there is plenty of work that needs to be done before then. I hope you all enjoyed this video, and I hope this gave you some valuable insights into the process of creating a new archetype for 5th edition. Please remember to click the subscribe button below. Your support is super helpful for the channel and Jetpack 7 as a whole. There will be another video coming up next week, but until then, thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you around.